Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Edric Show. I am your host, Edric Jerome. This is the place for intelligent conversation with interesting people. Go ahead and hit that subscription button, ring that notification bell, and you'll get notified when I post content each and every week. I know I always say I'm looking forward to conversations, but this one I have been looking forward to for quite a while. My guest is the distinguished poet, author, and retired instructor of English at Jackson State University, C. Liegh McInnis. He is one of the leading voices in our culture, and his poetry, essays, and collection of short stories shines a spotlight on the important themes of Black identity, social justice, and cultural heritage. His seminal work of literary criticism, titled The Lyrics of Prince, a literary look at a creative, musical poet, philosopher, and storyteller, examines the lyrical depth and artistic brilliance of one Prince Rogers Nelson. The book highlights Prince's ability to blend musicality with profound social commentary, personal introspection, and spiritual exploration. And he's here today to have a conversation with me about how Prince, through his incredible body of work, used his creative gift to uplift Black people and to systematically call out social, economic, and racial injustice. C. Liegh, it is good to see you again, my brother. How you doing? Welcome to the show.
Hey man, last time we saw each other, we was eating good and having great conversation. So
Man, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention shout out to the incomparable Alice Tisdale,
there we
publisher
go.
emeritus of the Jackson Advocate, one of the voices of Black America historically in Jackson, Mississippi, and nationwide. Miss
And one of
Tisdale,
the and
go
one of the oldest black newspapers in the country. So yeah,
Absolutely. Got a chance along with my counterpart, Sandra Varner of Varner PR. We got to spend some time, break some bread with you guys in Jackson, Mississippi. We had a lovely time and we had an amazing conversation. And so let's continue that conversation here today. A couple of contextual questions before we get into some of the individual songs. First question is, how did Prince's racial identity and experiences shape his music and worldview?
so Prince is a product of North Minneapolis. And I think that there's the mythological Prince and then there's the community Prince. And I think that post Purple Rain, most people have been sold the mythological prince, right? The biracial, erotic, exotic genius that kind of fell down from Saturn. There's a great book called I always have to remember called "Got to Be Here," um, "Got to Be Something Here," right? It's a great book. It's one of the few times that Prince is situated within his black community. But I think that people need to understand that Prince was a product of a thriving, although it was less than 3% black. Minneapolis had a thriving African American community that not only, despite being less than 3% black, parts of it went all the way back to the original founding of Minneapolis and Minnesota as a state. And so there's a long history of that black community being there. And so Prince then became a product of the civil rights movement, particularly the community center, the way, right, that was developed after the upheaval. He's the product of a jazz musician father and a singing mother who both migrated up from New Orleans. So there's that southern blues jazz bass. And he's also a product of the notion that black people didn't see themselves as monoliths. See, I think the problem is people outside of our community, they like to look at us and go, well, black people just do that. As you know, we created not just what is the seminal American music, all of the branches and strands of American music is black people. Blues, jazz, soul, rock, funk, that's all black music. That's all different incarnations of the wide ranging culture of black music. So when Prince is playing rock music, he's playing black music. When Prince is playing jazz, he's playing black music. When Prince is playing soul, but what Prince understood and what he got firmly from his black community in North Minneapolis is that you are not a monolith and you have the right to engage in the diversity,
Hmm.
right? The kaleidoscope, right? The spectrum of what is blackness. And so that is, I would say, Prince's the greatest thing he got from that North Minneapolis black community was that they never limited him by saying that you can only do one thing as a black man. I'll stop there.
Um, what do you think people miss about, because as we had talked about earlier, when in our conversation we were at dinner, a lot of people, they couldn't get past the pearls and the lipstick and whatever, but at his core, Prince was a strong black man. Why do you think people overlook that, and what are some of the reasons why you think maybe people should be more in tune with that?
Well, just because of what you said. First of all, masculinity in the West is a very rigid, flat, one-dimensional thing, right? We and so what has happened is we have taken a very limited, stoic notion of what it means to be masculine, what does it mean to be male, what it means to be heterosexual. And Prince has then played with that and been intentional. Like I think that's what people don't get. It wasn't just once we get to the lyrics, it wasn't just I'm looking like this to shock you and get your attention. Now let's be clear, that was part of it. He admitted that, right? I love that the interview he did with Chris Rock in the VH1 to one. He said, yeah, there was
Right.
some showmanship there. But when you couple that with the lyrics, Prince was specifically saying that not only is blackness more than what you understand it to be, masculinity is more than what you understand it to be, heterosexuality is more than what you understand it to be. And so it's the fact that he understood that he was fighting against a very limited, right? He was fighting against an industry based in a nation that could only see one type of thing as good: rigid, straight, heterosexual males, white males. And Prince was determined to say, no, black people is more than that. Other communities are more than that. But we still haven't been able to break away from this kind of limited or one-dimensional notion of what it means to be a man. You and I know one of the problems in our work, and we dealing with young brothers and young sisters, and that our young people are dying because they have embraced, and they don't even know that they've embraced this very Eurocentric, limited, monolithic notion of what it means to be a man and what it means to look for a man. That to be a man means to hurt other people. To be a man means to dominate other people. To be a man means to not have emotions. To be a man means to not smile. To be a man means to not to hug other people.
Not apologize.
Not apologize. There we
Right.
go.
Right.
All of those things, right? And so Prince, and then the work that you and I do and other black people are doing, are constantly fighting against. And Purple Rain, and I just but
Go
just to
ahead.
get to that movie, right? Purple Rain was clearly about Prince saying that that type of manhood is death. And if I follow that kind of manhood, if the kid follows that kind of manhood, he's gonna end up like his father, who attempted suicide, and that image of him hanging himself. So Prince was doing that beginning with his first album, Prince. I'm sorry, For You, and then Prince, and then Dirty Mind, and then Controversy, and then 1999. He had 5 albums of wrestling with and deconstructing what it meant to be a man. Why? So that we don't find ourselves metaphorically like the kid hanging
Hmm.
on that rope, destroying ourselves in the way that we're doing now. We're killing ourselves because the image and notion of manhood that we have is one of death.
When we met and had our dinner and had our conversation, it was before the election. Here we
Mhm.
are in a post-election world, and everything you said about the toxic masculinity is writ large now. But having said that, now that we are in this post-election world of the United States of America, let's get into some of the songs. And you shared a very interesting list. Now, those of my listeners and everybody knows me know I'm a massive Prince fan. And as all Prince fans know, when you go back and listen to things, you always hear something you didn't hear before. You always hear a nuance. There's something about those songs that they just stay fresh. They sound new. And your list, man, really got me thinking about this subject today. So let's get into it. The first song you shared with me was Baby from the debut album For You in 1978. What is it about that song, particularly the lyrics, about why you wanted to call that one out first?
So I'm gonna talk about Baby, but I'm gonna talk about him in his continued of Baby, Party Up, and Run It Talk to Russia because Prince was such a nuanced thinker. that he often got in trouble because he was addressing things that we didn't even know we had issues with. So when you look at a song about Baby, what is Baby? Baby tells the story of an unwed, expectant father fully accepting his responsibilities, right? Quote, should we go on living together? Should we get married right away? I barely have enough money for two. I don't want to regret what I've done to you, end quote.
Right.
By making an open reference to safe sex, and that's something not too common in popular music in 1978, he's showing his ability to handle complex situations and emotions while still being creative. But here's why I wanted to add it to our conversation. In 1978, 56% of black households were one-parent households, while only 16% of white households were only one-parent households. Thus, a song about teen or unexpected pregnancy, or even the possibility of a one-parent household, would resonate differently, if not deeper, with black listeners than with white listeners,
Hmm.
simply because of the demographics. Yet more important is Prince's handling of the topic, right? Quote, I've never thought this would happen to a very careful man like me, end quote. Baby adds another dimension to Prince's persona by dealing with a topic that one had been rarely discussed, but also by showing vulnerability in a black man dealing with an issue that would have been common to black people,
Hmm.
right? Prince's use of the first person adds the impact of a song, allowing the listener to experience firsthand. This was great about this song. We get a firsthand discussion about the part between the parties, right? He doesn't provide a quick, overly romanticized picture of the solution. We get to hear a black male experience all of the emotions and thoughts: shock, regret, fear, acceptance, resolve, and love. Quote, baby, what are we going to do? I better make enough money for two, right? And then he says, what he said at the end, I hope our baby has eyes just like you.
Hmm.
The uncertainty makes the protagonist a real person grappling with the responsibilities that come with newfound sexual freedom. Right? So the same Prince who gives you soft and wet
Right.
then says, oh, by the way, baby's the other end of it.
I'm taking responsibility. He was
There we
taking
go.
responsibility.
And
Right.
as a black man writing about soft and wet and writing about what's the other one? I'm Yours. Two sexually explicit songs. Prince is then presenting black males in a way in popular culture in 78 that still not get doesn't get presented in 2000 in 2024.
Hmm.
And so that's why I wanted to start with Baby, because I wanted to see Prince being a creative songwriter didn't just begin like after people discovered him after Purple Rain.
Hmm.
Homeboy kicked in the door, writing about things about which most people weren't going to write. And here's a guy, again, and what's sad is 56% of black households with one parent is up to 70% now.
Hmm.
So here he was giving a warning in 78. And because people weren't willing to take his lyrics as seriously as they should have been, many people missed that warning. And he's connecting that warning to one of his idols, right? Who was his idol? Sly Stone,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Where babies having babies.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that his song Baby is a direct nod to and inspired by Sly Stone's Babies Having Babies, right? From the womb to the tomb, Babies Having Babies. That Prince would later do, right? He would later cover in the 90s, right? And so that's why I wanted to start with Baby, because he's addressing, he may not say, hey, this is a black issue, but when you're addressing a social political issue that hits black people, what's the old saying? When white folks have a cold, black people have the flu.
Right.
Prince is addressing an issue that is monumentally an issue and critical to black people then and now. I'll shut up.
Hmm. Before we move on to the next song, real quick, because later on under Emancipation, he had a song, "Let's Have a Baby,"
Yep,
which is the same similar kind of theme. Hey,
yep.
love, black love, let's have this baby. So he carried that theme from beginning to almost mid-career when he was in the '90s when he did Emancipation.
And in both of them, something we missed, not you, but some people miss, because Prince is known for this sexually in Baby and then Let's Have a Baby. Marriage
Yep.
is promoted.
Yep.
Commitment is promoted. See,
Hmm.
people miss those things, and that's important. Why is that important? That's important because he remember the song that was a B-side. I think it was on the back of Scandalous Sex.
Yes.
People
Yes.
don't remember that Sex had a long title, and the subtitle was the 80s are over and the time has come for
Hmm.
love and monogamy.
Right.
So the same dude who was singing about 23 positions in a one night stand was also saying, hey, there's some consequences over here. And if you truly want a fulfilled relationship, you need to have both spiritual and physical. So I'm glad you brought up let's have a baby so that we can see that he's grounding it in love.
Hmm.
He's grounding it in the fact that we want to have a stable home. Because in both baby and let's have a baby, he's talking about the home needs to be right before we bring a child into it. I'll shut up.
Exactly. Exactly. Let's see. Let me go to the list. Next, let's go to Party Up. Let's go to
Again,
Party Up. Dirty Mind,
so
1980.
part I remember when this song came out in real time, and I remember again not picking but white critic. His critique was, well, Prince is writing a war song, and what the war song and time ain't no war. Well, number one is always war. Let's deal with that. But number
Perpetual War.
two,
Right.
let's go to some statistics. Did you know that in 1967, 29% of African American men were eligible for a conscription, that is to be drafted, compared with 63% of whites. So only 29% of black men were eligible to be drafted as opposed to 60% of white men. Yet the armed services drafted 64% of the African American pool compared to only 31% of eligible whites. Black Americans were more likely to be drafted than white Americans. And the Vietnam War saw a highest proportion of African American soldiers in military up to that point. So why would Prince write a song "Party Up," an anti-war song? Because he lived during the time when black men were coming from Vietnam broken. He lived through a time when black communities were devastated because black people were disproportionately drafted in relation. People don't know. I actually served in the Mississippi National Guard. I served in the National Guard. When I joined the National Guard, my father didn't join the military my father joined the military because he was so involved in the Civil War that a white sheriff came to my grandfather's house and said, if that little N word is still here, he's gonna be real familiar to a tree. So my
Mm,
grandfather put my father in the military because Vietnam was safer than Mississippi.
mm.
I served in the National Guard. I joined the National Guard, and I'll be clear, I ran out of money for school. That's the only reason I joined the National Guard. I ran out of money for school. My father was shocked. You know why? Because the National Guard was created for rich white people to put their sons in the National Guard so they wouldn't be drafted to Vietnam.
Mm.
Prince lived through that. So Party Up is not just an anti-war song. Party Up is also a song in which Prince is not specifically, but is articulating the pain of what draft did to the black community. And who's one of Prince's biggest heroes? Muhammad Ali.
Hmm.
And what is one of the things for which Muhammad Ali is known? For
Resistant.
refusing, there we
Exactly.
go, resisting the draft. So Party Up is not just the, hey, make love, make love, not war. Yes, it's that. But when he says, how you gonna make me kill somebody I don't
I don't
even
even
know?
know. Mm.
That's a what did Muhammad Ali say? I
Oh,
don't know no Viet Cong.
mm-hmm.
So Prince once again is amalgamating not just American culture, but amalgamating African American culture, and then representing it to the world for people to take a second look at it. And his problem is just because he's not being overtly black, right? And that's the problem is that the problem with popular music is most people don't get nuance and subtlety. You got to scream your point. And because Prince is often nuanced and subtle, particularly early in his songs, people miss that he's making a commentary about black community until you go to stats like I'm giving you, and then you can see like, hey, this is an African American issue because black men, black boys, let's call them what they were.
Mm-hmm.
If you
Mm-hmm.
17, 18, if you under 25, black boys were being taken from their communities disproportionately. And Prince is singing about in the same way that Martin Luther King, another one of Prince's heroes, right? Martin Luther King had a whole speech why I can't support the Vietnam War. And what does Martin Luther King say? He says two reasons I can't support the Vietnam War. One, because the resources that were promised to black people are now going to support the war. And two, black men are dying disproportionately in that war. This is Prince thinking about that and writing a song to the culture to have us think about that. That's it. I'll share.
Hmm. Next one. Ronnie talked to Russia, and I remember I was, just started getting in my teens when this song came out, and it was the first time I had ever heard the term gorilla. I had to actually, I
Yeah.
was thinking, okay, I was like, well, what is it? And I had to look at the spelling of it was different, and that's when I started thinking, okay, now I had to go look it up. So, talk to me about Ronnie talked to Russia, which is still just as timely today.
So Ronnie talked to Russia I added for a couple of reasons. There's this interview, and again, it's there. He said his words. When Ronald Reagan first got elected, right? And you have to understand that was some Jimmy Carter backlash. People saw Jimmy Carter as being soft because of the Middle East crisis, the hostage
Right.
crisis, right?
Hmm.
And you and I lived through that. We're old enough to live through that. And people don't know that that's actually that crisis created 24/7 news channels.
Right.
Nightline didn't exist before that hostage crisis, right? So Nightline, and then you got 24. So Carter was seen as soft and was seen as so when Reagan gets elected, there's this line where Prince gives in interviews. He said, "Well, at least Reagan has a big mouth, right? He'll be able to show some authority." Okay, and so a lot of people take that. Prince supported Reagan. Prince like no, it was part of. That's why Ronnie talked to Russia is so important because yes, he said in that interview, well, yeah, we need somebody to be strong, but he's also saying, hey man, don't go out here with these harebrained ideas trying to create no nuclear war. And if you connect that to Dirty Mind, because who gonna be the people on the front lines?
Right.
Who gonna be the people dying?
Hmm.
It's gonna be poor and black people. Black people and poor people. So Ronnie talked to Russia is a plea to the powers that be. Like it really is literally what he's saying that look, I don't he said before you what I love he said before you blow up the world, and then he says before you blow up my
My
world.
world. Hmm.
A black man taking agency. It is very important that a black man says, my word, a black man who gave you the war anthem, right? The anti-war song with Party Up, is now saying, hey, black folk, we're invested in this. We built this. We're part of the global civilization. So to have a black man to say, before you blow up my world, he's saying to the youth and to poor people and the black people, we have a right to petition the powers that be. And for me, as an 11-year-old black child, hearing a black man say, my world, and to say that I have just as much a right, and not only a right to petition, but a right to actually be knowledgeable. Because, like you said, guerrilla warfare, these things that are happening. The fact that if you connecting Dirty Mind to this, he says, look, said politicians get mashed potatoes and steak. We get ice cream, no cake. All
Hmm.
lies, no you. Truth, is it fair to kill you? So you gonna blow up the world and send us off to fight against Russia, and we don't get none of the benefits
Right.
of the colonization. We don't get none of the benefits of the profits from the war machine. And so in that statement, Ronnie Talk to Russia always resonated with me as a black man claiming his space and saying that we have a right to fight for this thing because we're going to be the ones disproportionately harmed. That's it.
Hmm. The next song you put me on to, and as a knowledgeable, longtime Prince fan, this is one that slipped under my radar. Let's talk about Jerk Out. And most people, they probably know the Times version, which was sanitized
Right.
on the Time album, Pandemonium in 1980, or the unreleased version by Maserati, because Maserati did it too.
Yep.
But the lyrics to Prince's 1981 version really stand out. So talk to me about that and why that's such an important song, not just because of the subject matter, but just because of the the boldness it took to write those lyrics. Talk to me about that.
And the year in which he wrote it.
Right.
Right. So Jerk Out is written in 1981. And I've always said, I wonder what would have happened if Prince would have released this song with the original lyrics.
At that point in his career.
Exactly. At that
Right.
point in his career.
Right.
Like this is way before Purple Rain.
Right.
Right? What kind of artist? How would he? So for a little context for those like you know the background and all this. So there was an incident on a plane, and it's not really clear what happened on the plane. But essentially, the Prince and some people, it's two parts. It was either Prince was removed from the plane, or maybe some other people removed from the plane. But it became very clear that they were removed because they were black. So if you think TSA just now started targeting black people, if you think that black people just now started getting, no, in 1981, black people were being targeted. And so Prince writes this song, which Maserati rejected the song because of the lyric. Think about how black, so I know a lot of people are like, what is this song? So I'm going to read some of the lyrics, but I mean, and I want to be clear. It's an angry song.
Very
I'm
much
not
so.
excusing some of the things that, but you know, when you're angry and you're venting, this is what comes out. So because of that being racially stereotyped and being Prince writes, and so here, so for those of you who know the Times version, as Brother Edric says, the sanitized about jerking women at the club,
Right.
just know that this original version ain't got nothing to do with picking up women in the club. So I'll go through a couple of lyrics and then talk about why I think this is so important. So here are the lyrics. Quote, I took her to the crib and I tied her up. I figured that was what she liked. Maybe I was wrong, but what the hell? It didn't matter to me. She was white. I said, how come people in your neighborhood don't like it when a brother's rich? Ain't my blood the same color as yours? Answer that question, bleep. It just pisses you off to see me driving that fancy car, don't it? I bet you'd rather see me driving one of those Esther Great ones, like the one your daddy drives, wouldn't you? Let me tell you one thing that's dead. About dead as you'll be if you don't rearrange your brain. End quote. As early, so that's the quote. As early as 1981, Prince was already thinking about the flaw in the whole multicultural utopian society that he was building with his own persona.
Hmm.
These lyrics are definitely discussing the African American concern with driving while black, right? DWB, along with being inspired by the airplane incident that I mentioned. And think about this. This song would have been 7 years before NWA is Straight Outta Compton.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are a couple of things to remember. Is that in America, sex and race are intersections for racial oppression. As James Brown stated, quote, its color is its size, end quote. That is, something that's black is seen to be more imposing just because it's black. That's why most of the lynchings that occurred in America, black males were castrated prior to the actual lynching as a literal and figurative way to protect whiteness by protecting white women. Emmett Till first comes to mind. And as late as 2016, the white supremacist Dalen Roof, I hope I'm pronouncing that, Dalen Roof was yelling, quote, this is for sleeping with our women, as he
Mm-hmm.
murdered African Americans in a South Carolina church. As such, this deleted verse from Jerk Out is important because prior to this moment in Prince's career, with Ice Cream Castles being written 3 years later, Prince had never specifically identified the race of a woman in a song. Now, check
Mm-hmm.
me on that. But I don't think that prior to this 1981 version of Jerk Out, Prince had never had named a woman's race. And here he's clearly letting you know that this woman is white. As such, it's important that he identifies her as white, as it's clearly important to the narrative and message of the song. So when he says, ain't my blood the same color as yours, his point is to juxtapose that idea to the idea that her people, her daddy, and his type and her type can't see beyond skin color. Thus, it's a rhetorical question designed to highlight the racism and hypocrisy of the lady's father and other white people's racism. So again, the fact that he specifically mentions the race of the woman and then connects that to a major issue or concern in the African American community, driving while black, which interestingly is still a major concern and issue in the African American community, provides enough weight and evidence that this verse is a clear example of Prince expressing and discussing this specific African American concern again 7 years before Straight Outta Compton and
But
F the Police.
before we move on, though, there's another little twist on that lyric because he also talks about captivity, meaning he's, and obviously by today's standards, these lyrics, of course, would be rejected. But he
Right.
mentions tying her up because he knows that's what she likes, which goes into that whole mentality of capturing people, enslaving people, restricting them. So a very interesting twist on that
Yep.
line because he's literally saying, I know that's what you like, which is us being in captivity.
That's perfect. I couldn't have said that better. And again, showing Prince's genius, right? His wordplay, right? I'm gonna tie you up because you like tying us up, and
Right.
you fetishize, right? They have a fetish for capturing and controlling and colonizing and oppressing people not like them.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, thank you, brother, for turning me on to that one because that one has slipped under my radar. And like I say, I'm one of the ones that's, Prince was my muse. And so uh I could see why in 1981 that song wasn't going nowhere.
Oh no, no, we're nobody doing that. So look, Maserati like, nah, but we
Nah,
trying to get a hit. You got
nah.
hits. We trying to get one. But
Exactly.
I want to say to you though that, and this is the great thing about being a Prince enthusiast or a Prince fan or Prince scholar, however you want to do it. What I love is Prince was so productive
Hmm.
that every day I meet another scholar or lover of the work like you that hit me to something. And one of the things I like to say when I'm doing my community work, I said each of us doing our part makes sure that the circle remains unbroken. And so, just like I may hip somebody to something, people are always hipping me to stuff because it's impossible for one person to really discuss the genius of Prince because his genius was really just you have to get into people like Stevie Wonder and those kind of people to really kind of contextualize. So what I say to you, brother, is just like you enriched me that night we were having dinner and talking. That's what we do as scholars and lovers of this work. Because Prince left so much work, it's impossible for one of us to know all of it.
Absolutely. And real quick, if you go on YouTube, there's actually a live version from a rehearsal that Prince did of Jerk Out from back in the day. So it's out there. And obviously like I say I can't put links and I can't put that kind of thing on YouTube or whatever because of copyright. So but we'll have it on the crawl, all the songs and the albums, so you can go find them. And the one thing I tell people all the time, if you're going to listen to Prince, pull up the lyrics and listen to the words and the music because it
Yep.
just opens your mind up to a lot more introspection and a lot more things. And there's a lot going on in his music. So take that for what you will. Let's move on. Let's move up a little bit. Let's go to The Sacrifice of Victor from the Love Symbol album in 1992. What are the key points in that song and why did you highlight that one?
So the sacrifice of Victor, it has a dual meaning, both on the album and what that album means. Because remember, that's the album after which he changed his name to the
Right.
unpronounceable symbol. So the sacrifice of Victor is about his individual identity and struggle and the collective identity and struggle of Black people. And so it's the declaration. The song is the declaration of the new creature of the done, right? The symbol,
Hmm.
right? What I tell people is, right, is the declaration of him becoming this, right? And so it represents the spiritual notion of the song My Name is Prince. So from that same album you get My Name is Prince. That's My Name is Prince is the physical declaration. Sacrifice of Victor is the spiritual declaration, but he comes full circle because he's setting it in Egypt, which is Africa, the mother of civilization. Thus, the sacrifice of Victor discusses the struggle and search for identity and the victory of an individual and a race. Through the use of extended metaphor, he's able to deal with the dual struggle and identity by the African American race and by African American individuals. This is the notion of dichotomy, and the struggle between the collective community and the individual is at the core of the African and African American literature, as evidenced by writers such as Chinua Achebe,
Hmm.
Adelaide Casey Hefford, Gene Toomer, Ralph Ellison, and so many more. Prince builds on the tradition by interjecting his personal story, which he is signifying on at the highest level. Right? By doing this, he creates a call and response technique, the ancestral call of the individual response. Essentially, so Prince, you have the individual story of him being born with epileptic seizures, right? So that's and
Under
how
terrible
he's
circumstances. I mean, the birth is shocking and terrifying the way
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Born on a blood-stained cable, cord wrapped around my neck, epileptic to the age of 7. I knew I should heaven had marked the debt. What does that individual birth represent? It represents the birth of Africans into African Americans.
Mm.
It represents the child abuse of Africans into African Americans, right? Right? So the epileptic seizure is when one loses control of one's mind and body function. The epilepsy of the child represents the state of African slaves who had no control over their minds and bodies until they were able to mature as citizens and be recognized as humans. The cord wrapped around the neck symbolizes the oppression and arrested development of African beings in America. It is literally a lynching metaphor. From there, he begins to build metaphor on top of metaphor until his allegory is completed. The most prominent image is the mother protecting the child from child abuse, which alludes to one, his own troubled childhood, as well as the arrested development of African American children. The second major image is the school busings,
Right.
which brought false integration and did very little to develop the African American community. Then, after firmly blending the individual and the collective images, he's back to the objective and more journalistic and verbal with I, right? Quote, never understood my old friends laughing. They got high when everything else got wrong. Dr. King was killed and the streets started burning. When the smoke cleared, their high was gone, end quote. After the social and historical commentary from the objective observer, Prince moves into the realm of the personal I, acknowledging Bernadette. Who was Bernadette? Bernadette Anderson, the woman with whom he lived through his high school years, and the mother of his first bassist, Andre Simone. Quote, Bernadette, the lady, she told me, whatever you do, son, a little discipline is all you need. End quote. By mentioning the role of Bernadette, Prince is paying homage to the tradition of the extended family, which is also a trait of the African American survival against slavery and urbanization. Right? Finally, right after Prince acknowledges history, he turns to his future. Quote, my feet might get tired, but I'm going to keep on walking down that road. And when I reach my destination, that's when my name will be Victor. Amen. End quote. In acknowledging his future, he uses the language and the tone of the past. Negro spirituals. The whole riff of the song is a Negro spiritual. It's a gospel song. Again, this shows that our future is guided by our past, thus our identity. Know who we are by knowing from where we come is the rock and compass that sustains and guides us. The sacrifice of Victor was Prince drawing a line in the sand saying that from this forward onward, I'm not just going to be talking about freedom and justice and truth. I'm going to be using specifically the African American lens through which to discuss these things. And he does it by reaching back sonically to the Negro spiritual and the African American gospel and tropes African American history through busing to create a new platform to talk about not just the struggle. And here's what Prince differentiates himself: not just the struggle of black folks, but the victory of black folk.
Mm-hmm.
Prince was always giving us hope. Why? Because that's part of what Columbia Kalam calls the blues aesthetic. The blues aesthetic. Black people were always hopeful. Whenever, if you go back and read old white critics, and they're talking about the 1999 album or the 1999 tour, they are talking about the apocalypse, but they're talking about it through a rock heavy metal lens, right? Iron Maiden, Kiss,
Mm-hmm.
right? All of those things. What separates the way in which the white culture addresses the apocalypse, Prince was always talking about the apocalypse through a Christian spiritual lens. We're not going to die in the apocalypse. That's why in 1999 there's a party, because he has the belief in the great goodness of life. That's also a second element of the blues aesthetic, the belief in the great goodness of life. So Prince is addressing the apocalypse, but what would confuse many of the white rock critics that he wasn't addressing it from the doom or gloom. And so the sacrifice of Victor is another example of him saying, yes, times have been hard, but times have always been hard for black people, and it's been our faith and our courage and our strength that saw us through the past that's going to make us victors in the future. That's it.
Hmm. Let's go to a deep cut now. Let's go to Exodus, the album Exodus. And if you happen to have Exodus on vinyl, congratulations, because that's one of the rarest Prince albums out there. But let's talk about the song that Exodus has begun, which sonically is kind of an homage to George Clinton. I mean,
Thank you.
it's got that
Thank you.
Parliament funkadelic aspect to it. Even some of the way the background singers are and the way George Clinton did his thing. But the lyrics, and it's like a lot of Prince songs, it's different styles within each song. But talk to me about the Exodus has begun, and why I think that's one of his most important songs.
I'm glad you started sonically, right? There's another song on that album too called Return of the Bump Squad,
Yep,
right?
yep.
And so those two
Bow down,
songs,
MF.
there you go. There you go. And so yeah, so what Prince is doing is he's letting us know that pop and funkadelic was Afrofuturism before we had the term Afrofuturism. Why is Afrofuturism important? Because the difference between Afrofuturism and sci-fi, which is a more European concept, Afrofuturism sees spirituality as technology.
Mm,
African people saw spirituality as technology. So in your average sci-fi video, it's the physical thing that's going to save humanity. Afrofuturism, no, it's not the machines that's going to save us. It's the evolution of our spirituality. So it is, so the Exodus has begun is psychologically funky and mystic, troping the images of Sir Nose, the fictional character and alter ego of Dr. Funkenstein. Sir Nose's job is to stop the funk, which is a metaphor from keeping knowledge from the people. Prince is used in this song, The Exodus has begun. Prince is raising the notion of capitalistic pigs to that of alien invaders, right? White people who come into the black community and take our stuff. Alien invaders from whom the world and the arts must be protected because the arts represent the soul of humanity. The Exodus has begun is serving notice that Prince and other artists are not waiting to be free. They are taking their freedom. The Exodus has begun. Not the Exodus gonna begin. Not the Exodus has begun. The new power generation is going to save the world with funky music and meaningful lyrics that cause a revolution, causing the slaves to leave Babylon. Quote, I love this line, quote, now these are the days of the new power generation, the funkiest suckers of the new gold nation. Polyvinyl acetate, new power soul, guaranteed to stick to the roof of your Oldsmobile. End quote. Though a criminalist, the new power generation is led by love, for vengeance belongs to God. What the new power generation does, they do in love. And even by running the thieves out of the temple, he says, quote, these are the names of the children of the sun, pumping the love sign in the days of wild, tearing shit up with a vengeance, and still they smile. They are smiling. We are blues people. We are smiling through our hell. We are loving you even though we corrected you. And still they smile, though their lives have been made bitter with hard labor and no pay. These are the children who will come to save the day. And then he takes it and then he tropes black liberation theology. And what I love when he tropes black liberation theology is that he says, look, your physical evil is really a manifestation of your spiritual evil.
mm,
And so your
mhm,
spiritual evil, if you are an oppressor, if you are an enslaver, if you are a rapist, if you have evil type, your physical deeds are going to end you in spiritual ruin. He said in spiritual ruin. He says, quote, behold, behold, the children of the new power generation are more mighty than you. You have scorned and held back the inevitable, must now come to grips with the truth. All that is good in the eyes of heaven will rebuke your power monkey ways, and let that same heaven have mercy on you. And then I love this part. He says, and if they stood up and behaved like the humans they're supposed to, as opposed to the way they are not, then this new power soul would not be so soulful. And then the water they in would not be so hot. The Exodus has begun, and I end here. Prince's message is not just to the oppressors. Prince's message is to us. Prince is saying, look, don't fight evil with evil. Don't be evil like the oppressors. They gonna be in not just a spiritual hell, they gonna be in an evil hell. Right? What did Malcolm say when Kennedy got shot? What did Malcolm say? He says the chicken coming home to roost. Malcolm said you can't be surprised that your president is getting shot when you shot up people all over the
mhm,
globe. So you can't be surprised that little white children constantly walk into elementary schools and shoot up elementary schools when people have used the gun to oppress people all over the globe. So Prince is saying not only will they have spiritual judgment, the Exodus have the gun is also saying to the oppressed, don't be like them.
mm,
Because what I contend, what's wrong with America is that the people who were the soul of America, black people, have lost our soul. And
mm,
because we have lost our soul, America no longer has the redeeming qualities that Prince is telling us in the Exodus has begun. That's it.
mm, mm. Yeah, if you happen to have a copy of Exodus, or if you want to find it, that album is there's so much to the artwork, everything about that underground album, which, again, one of those ones where you could see why it wasn't going to be available commercially because of, basically what he's saying. He's telling the truth. And a lot of times the truth wasn't necessarily wanted or well received. So shout out to Prince for Exodus and putting that out there at a time when he was going through a lot of turmoil with his career and all that stuff. So the man was still prolific, even though he was going through what he was going through. Let me fast forward a little bit now. Let's talk about Avalanche from One Night Alone. Um, First of all, there's two versions. Obviously, the one that came out on the if you have one of the CDs that came in the One Night Alone box set that came out back in the day. I think it was like 94. Anyway, whenever it came out.
Mhm.
But the live version of Avalanche on the One Night Alone live album is just an exquisite, exquisite Prince song. But talk to me about Avalanche and why that one is just again, listen to it and listen to the word, read the lyrics while you listen to it. So talk to me about Avalanche.
So Avalanche begins, you have to understand Avalanche comes out 5 years after the release of Emancipation.
Hmm.
And Emancipation was Prince not waiting on somebody to free him, he freed himself. So the song Avalanche begins by first destroying a fallacy. Lincoln didn't free black people. The Emancipation Proclamation was not designed to end freedom. The Emancipation Proclamation was a military strategy. And I'm amazed that in 2024, people don't understand the South was winning the war because it takes more money to win wars. So the Emancipation Proclamation simply was a carrot to the slaves in the South because the country is split. So he's basically saying if you left the Union, you can't have slaves. Well, that's like you trying to fire me the day after I quit. You
Right.
can't tell the South. So the
Right.
Emancipation Proclamation, for so many reasons, is a null and void document. Yet Lincoln gets credit for freeing the slaves. And Prince is saying here in Avalanche, our problem is we don't know our history. And we don't know who do and because we don't know our history, we don't know who do and doesn't love us.
Right.
Lincoln specifically said, if I can save the Union and keep slavery, so be it. If I can save the Union and end slavery, so be it. So Lincoln wasn't concerned about ending slavery. Lincoln was concerned about saving the Union of white folks. So Prince is saying that Lincoln's proclamation is flawed because Lincoln was a racist who never sought to provide equality to people of African descent. Prince sings, quote, he was not or never have been in favor of setting our people free. Abraham Lincoln was a racist who said you cannot escape from history, end quote. With the Emancipation Proclamation, the larger white society was defining freedom for black population. That's what the whole song Avalanche is about. It's about other people defining for you what freedom is. In fact, African Americans were not allowed to develop any policy or have any discussions about their own freedom or liberty until 1964. Black people did not get free until 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments are merely white rhetoric about black freedom and white people interpreting and developing the documents of freedom and liberty for African Americans. That's what this song is about. This song is about stop letting other people define for you what is freedom and what is wealth. So then he transitions from Abraham Lincoln and transitions to the Harlem Renaissance and the white patron who was essentially signing black artists
Hmm.
to the same type of slave contracts that were perpetuated for another 100 years.
John Hammond is who he's
John
referring to.
Hammond.
Hmm.
He said John Hammond is chilling in all of the cafes and juke joints, just signing black artists. Why? Because as he talks about in Golden Parachute later, he talks about the fact that their whole job, and I think he also mentions this in Radical Man 2045, their whole thing was to control our intellectual content. And so if people own your so John Hammond is buying up, doing the Harlem. And by the way, John Hammond is a real person. People, so go
Hmm.
look up John Hammond. John Hammond's a real person. And there's a debate. There's a real debate in the literary world. And whether or not was John Hammond a patron or promoter of black arts, or was he a thief?
Mm.
Like there's a real debate. And Prince clearly is saying, how could he be a patron and savior of black arts when he's taking ownership of art from black people? When he's taking the thing that allows black people to build wealth. So avalanche, and so the metaphor for avalanche is nobody wants to address or acknowledge or take responsibility, right? No one wants to take responsibility. No one wants to take responsibility of this avalanche of oppression. What he's saying here is record executives, this is just how it is, Prince.
Mm.
CEOs,
Mhm.
this is how it is. So they are profiting off exploiting us, but they don't want to take responsibility. And he's saying we got to stop letting people exploit us. We got to understand somebody started the avalanche. But by the way, what people don't understand about an avalanche is avalanches never get smaller, they get what?
Bigger.
So as long
Hmm.
as you are participating in the system, you are responsible for the avalanche because you are perpetuating an evil system, profiting for it from that system, while that system bulldozes and kills the people from whom you're profiting. I'll shut up.
Again, the lyrics and the mind and the artistry of Prince is much deeper than what you would be led to believe. And so, if you really want to get into a history lesson in this country, dive into the lyrics of Prince. And quick aside, you talked about the Civil War, and just know that here in California, the reason California is a free state was not because of the humanity towards man. It was to keep the South from bringing slaves in to do the digging in the gold mines and
Yep,
get that capital base for the
yep,
South. So know your homework, do your homework about California
exactly.
and why it's a free state. But we'll move on. Let's talk now about. I'm going to bring it up a little bit forward now because we're getting close to the end. Let's talk about a more recent song, Black Muse from the 2015 album Hit and Run Phase 2. A lot going on in that song too. So talk to me about Black Muse.
So I'll connect, since we sort of, I'll connect Black Music to Free Yourself. And what I
Okay.
love about these two songs, because these are really what most folks consider the last two public singles by Prince.
Hmm.
And I think it's apropos that these are the last two, quote, public singles and public releases by Prince. I think that both songs recall and evoke the grooves of the 70s message music with lyrics designed to uplift the African American community. With Black Muse, Prince presents the history of Black oppression to show that African Americans have not arrived at their current plight because of their ineptitude, but because of white supremacy. That's an important message. See, in the rhetoric of today, the neo-Confederates are passing because this is why they don't want black people to know their history. They want black people to think you're in your condition because of bad choices that you made, because you're lazy, because you're unintelligent. Prince says, quote, Black Muse, we've been so abused. Long ago, two men held one of us down. Another took a whip and made a terrible sound. Baby, we watched the father falling down to the ground. That was you and me, end quote. Prince is making it clear. Know your history. Know that you are in the situation that you are in because it was constructed that way. That's one of the points from Black music I want people to get. That Prince is being clear about the erosion of history. The reason that people don't want you to know your history is because if you don't know your history, they can keep doing it to you.
Mm.
And then Prince ends by, and again, this is Prince coming out of that blues aesthetic, coming out of that hope and belief. Prince ends by providing hope for African Americans, showing that they have a strength to endure and change their situation, and clarifying that the saving grace of African Americans is the people themselves. Quote, just came this morning and it's mighty good news. We gonna make it through. Surely people that created rhythm and blues, rock and roll and jazz, so you know we're built to last. End quote. That is Prince. Not only, and this is what makes Prince different from so many others. In the song Da Da Da,
Hmm.
right?
Off Emancipation.
You have Off Emancipation. Prince opens and sings, and then there's an MC who comes after him. If you read the lyric sheet, Prince doesn't include the MC's lyrics because he says ranting isn't a solution.
Mm.
Whenever Prince gave a problem, he always gave a solution to that problem. That's the hope. And so the great thing that I love about Black music, the last message that we get from Prince is almost equal to the last message we get from Martin Luther King. King says, I may not get there with you, but I promise you that we as a people will get to what's from the last single we get from Prince, what do we get? He says, surely people that created rhythm and blues, rock and roll and jazz. So you know we're built to Black muse. Who's the muse? We are.
Hmm.
Prince is saying you don't have to look. I love that Alice Walker, the novelist and poet Alice Walker said that we are the ones for whom we've been waiting, or you are the ones for whom you've been. Prince with Black music saying, Black people, we are our own saving grace. If we just know our history and remember how creative and innovative we are, we will save ourselves. That's it.
Before we get out of here, and I'm gonna have you back on. We got this is just the opening door of this conversation. I'm gonna have you back, man. We're gonna talk Prince for a while. But let me ask two main questions to wrap this up. One, as someone who actually got to sit down with the man, to talk to him, to see him in a non-public way, which many of us never got to see. Um, what did you take away from him? Because here's this guy, we see him on stage, this big, just larger than life, just a giant among creativity and everything. But you saw him in private moments and had a chance to really just sit down and conversate with him. What did you take away from those interactions you had with him?
The two things, especially for folks like me and you, right? Not the casual fan, but folks like me and you who were digging into the lyrics. The 18 months, spent 18 months with him off and on. He is, or he was, not only as smart, but as well read as his lyrics indicate. So those references, those cultural references that go out through his work through over time, he was always sharp intellectually and on top of it, and always thinking about what's the best way to get this message to people. And so early in his career, and by the time I meet him, right, 2002, early in his career, Prince was like, okay, I'm gonna get these sensationalized things, and I'm going. What's the song? What's my name? He says, "You wouldn't have drank my coffee if I wouldn't have given you cream." What
Oh,
is that? What's my name, or is that?
I think that is what's my name. I think
Yeah, what's
so.
my name? He
I
said, "You
think
wouldn't
so.
have drank my coffee if I wouldn't give you cream." What he's saying is Carlos Santana, and I'm gonna put a plea out to the people in the chat because I'm looking for this Carlos Santana interview. If you haven't, and if you've seen it, because I think it's important. Carlos Santana said Prince is one of the greatest guitars we've ever had, but he had to do a striptease to get noticed.
Hmm.
So early in his career, Prince had something to say, but he knew he had to get your attention. Later in his career, he was rethinking the ways in which he needed to get people's attention. But in both times, he's thinking about how can I get you this information? So for that entire 18 months, it was always him thinking about, I got some information for the people. And acknowledging, like he acknowledged both publicly and to me. Like remember he said, hey, I know for a lot of people, I'm always gonna be the dude who had his butt out on MTV. But I can't let that stop me from finding different ways to get this information to the people.
Hmm.
And so those are the two things with that Prince was as well read and as knowledgeable as his lyrics led us to believe. And he never stopped thinking about how can he get this knowledge to the people. He was truly an artist who was concerned about leaving art that made you better today than you were yesterday.
Hmm. And my last question for you on this topic is, how do you think his music is going to influence subsequent generations? I mean, you and I, we go deep, deep, deep into Prince's catalog. We know it, we study it, right. But for the casual person or the average person, how can these gems, how can his messaging get to them so that future generations can be on top of this knowledge and understand their heritage and where we need to go as a people?
So after Prince's death, two things start happening by not all, but the mostly white media. I have to give a shout out again to Andrew Swinson in her book, Got to Be Something Here. Because she's one of the few white critics who situated Prince in his black community. After Prince died, two things started happening. They started overly promoting the myth of Prince as the mulatto, exotic, sexual fiend, and they act like Purple Rain was the only album he ever wrote. And so, those of us who are knowledgeable, we have to be. W.B. Du Bois said that you have to be willing to fight for and say what's right, both in season and out of season. So we can't wait till it's fashionable to tell the truth. So if those of us who were inspired by Prince's work, who love Prince's work, we have to be willing to say when it's uncomfortable, Prince was a black man who came from a black community, and Purple Rain is not the only work he made. We have to be willing that when people invite me, you, and others on to say we want to talk about Prince, that we got to say, well, I'm gonna talk about more in Purple Rain. Other than my book, right? So I wrote my book on Prince, originally written in 1997, was re-edited in 2000, right? Other than my book, 2024 was the first time I actually gave public lectures on Purple Rain.
Mm.
And I only did it because it was the 40th anniversary of the album and the movie. So all that time from 1997 to 2024, I spent my time discussing the rest of Prince's catalog. And so what we have to be willing to do as lovers and scholars of the work, Angela Davis said that her greatest fear is that somebody was going to narrow her down to a picture of her wearing an afro on a t-shirt.
Mm.
And we know that Angela Davis was much more than that. We cannot allow the mainstream media to narrow Prince to Purple Rain. Not that it's not a great record. Not that it's not a great concept record. But if you do that, you are not only narrowing Prince, you are narrowing the humanity of blackness that Prince is representing throughout his entire career. So that's what must happen. We have to be willing, we have to be forthright in saying, if you invite me on, if you want me to write a paper, those of us who see ourselves as Prince fans and Prince scholars, and by the way, if you're a fan and have information, you're a scholar. That's the other thing is we have to also be willing, like you're doing, to not let somebody else tell our story.
Right.
So that's what I would say. Not let somebody else tell our story and be intentional in letting people know that Prince is more than Purple Rain. He's more than the 80s, that he produced a lot of great work in the 90s and 2000, and that work not only resonated then, it continues to resonate today. That's it.
Well said. Well said. Well, if people want more information about you, C. Lee, or your book, or just things in general, where can they go to get more information about you and maybe contact you if they have some questions?
As an old dinosaur, they can come. They can go to when I say they go to my website. I just saw 100 people under the age of 25 go website. I
You ain't
can't
on the
find you on
ground?
Instagram. I can't DM you, brother. Unfortunately, you
Right.
can't DM me. So go to my website, psychedelicliterature.com. If you can't spell psychedelic, don't worry about it. Just keep typing, it'll pop up. So go to my website, psychedelicliterature.com, or you can email me directly. My name is Liegh McInnis at bellsouth.net. If you can't remember that, my email is at my website. So go to psychedelicliterature.com. I have a newsletter that discusses a whole lot of things, particularly African American literature and art, with a Southern emphasis. That newsletter comes out every Friday. But again, go to my website, psychedelicliterature.com, shoot me an email. I'm more than willing to talk, to present. I'm a poet, short story writer, Prince scholar, lover of the blues. I'm a blues man, not a blues man, and I'm happy and willing to talk with anybody about it. And thank you, brother
Oh, for
Edric,
sure.
because again, you feel my spirit the night we had dinner together. Again, shout out to Sister Alice Tisdale because she made this connection happen. You and your partner, y'all feel my spirit that night, and you are continuing to feel my spirit now. So thank you, brother, for all the work that you're doing. Because again, it's important that we are the keepers and disseminators of our culture. Appreciate you, brother.
Oh, of course. Likewise, man. Thank you for coming on and sharing your insights, your scholarly approach, and the way you were able to connect his blackness to just about everything he did, which I think, again, We talked pre-election. Now here we are post-election. I think it's more important than ever that we pick up these lessons and learn from them and maneuver about how we're going to address some of the things that's coming our way. So,
Let me say one
yes,
last
sir.
thing. Because about this election, here's my response to the people in the election. When Prince wrote the song Baltimore, and then he went and he gave the concert. I don't want people to miss what he said. He said, "Hey, next time I come to Baltimore, I want to play in an arena owned by you.
Mm,
I want to sleep in a hotel owned by you." For those of us who are upset about this election, Prince made it clear. You got to own and control your masters, or your masters will own and control you. You got to own and control until we embrace economic sovereignty in the way that Prince embraced economic sovereignty. So I leave you with Prince's words. The next time I come to a place to play, I want to play in a place owned by you. I want to sleep in a hotel owned by you. If we follow Prince's words, we will be the beings, and we will. And our plan would not be to continue to beg evil people to be nice to us.
right.
We will create our own institutions where we control our own destiny.
Exactly, exactly. Well, brother C. Liegh McInnis, thank you so much for coming on the Edric Show. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna have to have you back because, like I say, this is just a small slice of the conversation we're gonna have going forward. So as things come up, I'll reach out to you and we will do this again, bro.
Definitely. Thank you, brother.
All right, you're welcome. This has been another edition of the Edric Show. As promised, intelligent conversation with interesting people. Go ahead and hit that subscription button, ring that notification bell. You'll get notified when I post content each and every week. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will catch you on the next episode.